5.03, Filling in the Map. This goes along with your Human Odyssey reading pages 210 to 221 and your student guide pages 133 to 135. Please make sure you have your student guide book opened and you can start filling in the answers as we go through the lesson. Lesson Introduction. Just 30 years after Columbus first tried to reach Asia by sailing west, a Spanish expedition circumnavigated the globe. By then, Europeans knew there were huge landmasses between Western Europe and Eastern Asia. As explorers sailed west into uncharted sea, they encountered parts of those continents and claimed them for their monarchs. But their real goal was still to reach the riches of the Indies. Other expeditions continued to risk everything by going through treacherous waters around the southern tip of Africa. The wealth and fame these explorers imagined would make all the hardship and danger worthwhile. But no one could have imagined what really occurred as a result of these explorations. The lesson objectives. Recognize that 15th century standards for the behavior of nations differed from modern standards. Describe the events leading to Portugal's claim to Brazil and the consequences of that claim. Identify Ferdinand Magellan. Identify Pedro Cabral. Identify the line of demarcation and explain its purpose. Identify Vasco da Gama. And locate on a map the route Magellan took, the major land areas and bodies of water on the route, and the distance the expedition traveled. Summarize the significant events of Magellan's voyage. So this is on page 133 of your student guide. There was an activity where you were to write a story or a few paragraphs using the words that you had to choose. So the next, the next 2 slides are in reference to that. Actually, I think the next 3 slides. Queen Isabella of Spain heard of King Manuel's plans to send ships west to claim land for Portugal. They asked him to wait until it was decided to whom the seas and conquests belonged. In 1493, Pope Alexander VI established the line of demarcation, which divided the world in 2. Portugal could claim lands east of the line of demarcation, and Spain could claim lands west of the line. The Treaty of Tordesillas moved the line of demarcation farther west and gave Portugal clear rights to an eastward sea route to the Indies. Again, this goes along with page 133. This is additional vocabulary. You can make this another paragraph if you'd like. In 1497, King Manuel sent Vasco da Gama on an expedition to find an eastward sea route all the way to the Indies. He was successful. In 1498, he reached Calcutta, India. Sea voyages were dangerous. During the 15th and 16th century, sailors often got scurvy, which is a disease caused by a severe lack of vitamin C, and they died. In 1500, King Manuel appointed Pedro Cabral to lead a fleet of 13 ships to India. To take advantage of the trade winds, Cabral at first sailed west. He went farther than he had intended and discovered and claimed for Portugal land that is today part of Brazil. Cabral was able to claim Brazil for Portugal because it was located east of the line of demarcation. Because Portugal colonized it, most Brazilians today speak Portuguese. So those are the 3 slides that go with page 133. Now we're on to the next question. Portugal and Spain were rivals in the exploration of the seas. Both nations were sending out voyages of exploration. The main reasons Portugal and Spain sent out voyages of exploration were, number 1, they hoped to establish sea routes to the Indies so they could bring spices, gems, and other goods back to Europe to trade. They also both wanted to claim distant lands to enlarge their empires. Europeans of the 15th century had no problem dividing the globe and claiming lands around the world as their own. What has changed since that time? So the Spanish and Portuguese saw the world differently than we do today. In the 15th century, the idea of rights did not exist. There was no concept of equal rights for all individuals or the rights of nations to rule themselves. What prevents nations today from doing what Spain and Portugal did then? It was not until the early 20th century that the idea of self-determination began to take hold. People decided they should be able to choose their own governments. Empires began to crumble as countries declared their independence after World War I and World War II. Many nations in Africa gained independence in the 1960s. Today, the world does not accept the idea that a country can claim territory outside its borders. Exploration notes of Ferdinand Magellan and his search for a sea route through the Americas to the Indies. So landfall in Brazil. Magellan, sails west from Spain, encounters storms and calms in the Atlantic. The 5 ships make landfall on the east coast of South America. They trade with the natives and restock their food and water supplies. Wintering over in Patagonia. The expedition leaves Brazil and heads south along the coast. They stop and anchor in a bay for the winter. They meet the natives of Patagonia. One ship is lost to a storm. The mutiny. Possibly because they resent Magellan's Portuguese nationality, a group of Spanish officers mutinies and takes control of 3 of the ships. Magellan eventually regains control of the fleet and severely punishes the mutineers. Discovering the strait. When spring arrives, the fleet heads south again. They enter a large bay and Magellan sends 2 ships to explore it. 2 days later, after a gale, Magellan gives them up for lost and prepares to sail. The 2 ships finally return and report finding a narrow channel opening into a second bay, with another channel beyond that. The entire fleet enters the winding strait and sails west. Mutineers on one ship sneak away and head back to Spain. A month after entering the strait, the 3 remaining ships sail out into the Pacific, and then crossing the Pacific. For more than 3 months, the 3 ships sailed northwest across the Pacific. The food begins to rot, so the crew is forced to eat rats, leather, and sawdust. Scurvy kills many of the sailors. The fleet makes landfall on the islands of Guam and Rota, where they find food and water. The fleet continues, and after crossing 13,000 miles of the Pacific, they reach the Philippines. Disaster in the Philippines. Magellan claims the islands of the Philippines for Spain and trades with the inhabitants. He baptizes a king, queen, and hundreds of other natives. One island chief refuses to welcome him, so Magellan attacks the island. The islanders attack Magellan and a small group of soldiers as they land on the beach. Some of his crew escape, but the islanders kill Magellan. The voyage home. After Magellan's death, his crew burns one ship and continues sailing west. Through the islands of Southeast Asia, they reach the Spice Islands and load a cargo of cloves. One ship sails east to try to reach Mexico. The other ship, the Victoria, sails west across the Indian Ocean heading for home. 3 years after leaving Spain, the Victoria, with only a crew of 18, returns home. And this is for the answers for the Focus on Geography, pages 137 to 139. They are in the blue links found in your OMS. So this section is optional, but go to your OMS, which is your K-12 lesson, your online school, and you can look for the blue link and you can find the answers for Focus on Geography. Again, this is optional. You do not need to fill this in. Okay? All right, and we come to the end of our flip video lesson. Thank you for joining me. Every experience is a form of exploration.